Welcome back to Mason Talks. So the ridiculous 2026 NFL head coaching carousel continues to spiral out of control. Earlier today, Sean McDermott was fired by the Buffalo Bills after a horrifically disappointing divisional round AFC playoffs loss to the Denver Broncos. And today I want to talk about why I truly believe Sean McDermott is the type of candidate who could completely upend the Cleveland Browns' coaching search. Now, at this point, the list of individuals who could become the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns is fairly well known, and it's continuing to develop into second round interviews. And, we're hearing a lot about guys like Jim Schwartz, Todd Monken, Mike McDaniel, Grant Udinski, Nate Scheelhaus. Those are all of the candidates who really seem to be leading the pack, at least at this point. And while Grant Udinski remains my number one contender, like my feet are still firmly planted on Grant Udinski Island, I could see the Browns expressing a lot of interest in Sean McDermott. He is the type of candidate who I think could really catch the eye, not just of Andrew Berry, but Jimmy Haslam as well, which is saying a lot. And there are some legitimately strong reasons for this. The first and foremost being the culture of winning that he developed in Buffalo. And, you look at the Bills' history and the type of team that they were, especially in the middle to towards the late 2010s, they were a middling team. They were an average team. They were not good. They didn't do a ton of winning under Rex Ryan, who was their coach at the time. And, they were in the midst of a 17-year postseason drought when Sean McDermott takes over 2017. And they go on then to have a 106-58 overall record with Sean McDermott as the head coach. They made the postseason 8 out of 9 times in his career with the Bills. And the first playoff appearance that he had with the Bills came with Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback. Back in 2017, that was, of course, when they shattered their 17-year postseason drought. So from the minute Sean McDermott got there, pretty much throughout his entire tenure in Buffalo, he was a winner. He brought a culture of winning. That's the entire headline for Sean McDermott. He won football games, and he did it consistently. And, even a team like this past season, there were some legitimate question marks in this Bills roster, and especially towards the start of the 25 season, things were up in the air. Things were a little bit iffy, and yet they still were able to make it to the divisional round of the postseason. And yes, a lot of that has to do with having Josh Allen as your starting quarterback. But regardless, you don't go to the playoffs in 8 out of 9 seasons with a complete schmuck as your head coach. Like Sean McDermott, he's the real deal. He's a proven winner. Now, you might be wondering, so why did he get canned? And, it really is similar to John Harbaugh in Baltimore. I think you just sort of run your course with a certain, coach quarterback combination at some point. And their playoff record now was 8-8 under Sean McDermott. There were no Super Bowl appearances, which of course, that's what you're hoping for when you have a top 3 quarterback in the league. And they were never able to get past the Chiefs, never able to get past the AFC title game. And I think at some point you just need to try something different. when you have a quarterback of that magnitude. It's the same in Baltimore. You can win every season, go to the playoffs all the time with Lamar Jackson, but, if you cannot win in the postseason, if you can't, eventually the standard gets raised and, the Super Bowl is the bar that you have to reach. And Shawn McDermott just didn't get there, in almost 10 seasons. So the Bills clearly just thought they needed a change in terms of their top voice. So Shawn McDermott, clearly right now, probably the top free agent in terms of the head coaching market. And when you look at where the Cleveland Browns are right now, I think we are in a incredibly similar situation as to where the Bills were back in 2017. This is a team that has had a little bit, a tiny bit of success over the past decade or so under Kevin Stefanski. Yes, you broke your own playoff drought. You were able to get a playoff win against Pittsburgh with Baker Mayfield as quarterback back in 2020. During that season, and the Browns were able to really, Kevin Stefanski did a lot in terms of, making this organization competent, and yet, much like the Bills, you still are not a top tier team in the league. Definitely not now after, firing Kevin Stefanski and where your roster is, especially the quarterback room. This is a team right now that I think is really close to slipping back into just being year in, year out, complete losers. And, that's a very similar position as to where the Bills were in 2017. And I think that if you were to get a coach such as a Sean McDermott, he could come in and help to set a culture of winning just like he did in Buffalo. And, those traits that he brings as a head coach are what attracted teams to him back, in 2017. It's what the Bills looked for when they decided to hire him after being, he had served as the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator before going to the Bills. And, another team back then that had been interested was the Cleveland Browns. In 2016, the Browns, they interviewed Sean McDermott for their head coach opening. And at that time, the brain trust that was leading the show, if you can call it that, was Paul DePodesta, Sashi Brown, and Andrew Berry. And, they preferred McDermott. He was the preferred candidate of that cycle. And, there's a connection there with Andrew Berry and Sean McDermott, that he was part of that trio that was pushing for McDermott to become the leader of the Browns, which would have completely shifted the entire course of this team and the history of the Cleveland Browns if it had happened back then. But, per usual, Jimmy Haslam got in the way. He overruled the brain trust and hired Hugh Jackson. And, we don't need to say anything else other than Hugh Jackson. You don't even need to go into any details about his tenure with the Browns other than just saying his name. And if I was Jimmy Haslam, which I can never predict how Jimmy Haslam feels about anything. It's impossible. He's the most difficult person in the history of Cleveland sports to read in terms of, what he's thinking for a certain personnel decision. But if I were Jimmy Haslam, there would be a huge chunk of my soul that would absolutely be dying to have another crack at getting Sean McDermott in the door into Berea to interview to become head coach of the Cleveland Browns. If I were Jimmy Haslam, I would be just chomping at the bit to make that happen. And this really seems to me like a candidate who you could unite the entire organization around in terms of Jimmy Haslam getting a little bit of, redemption in terms of giving Sean McDermott the shot, which he 100% deserved back in 2016. And, Andrew Barry, I feel like, would have to be, in terms of being, vindicated in that interest, you would have to think that Andrew Barry would be more than willing to bring Sean McDermott in for an interview. So I could 100% see the Browns wanting to kick the tires here on McDermott and try to get him to be the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns. However, another interesting thing to watch in terms of where he could end up coaching in 2026. Another part of that brain trust, who we mentioned, Sashi Brown, is currently an integral part in the head coaching search of the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens said that Sashi Brown, along with others, including, Ozzie Newsome, Eric DeCosta, they were going to be leading their head coaching search. And, just because of that Sashi Brown connection there, I would not be stunned at all to see the Baltimore Ravens try to get Sean McDermott as their next head coach. This just feels like a candidate who would be right up Baltimore's alley, as well as Pittsburgh. I mean, I wouldn't be stunned to see Sean McDermott get an interview in Pittsburgh as well. But, Sean McDermott, proven winner. I think he's an elite head coach. Obviously, he wouldn't be bringing Josh Allen with him. But this is, if you look at the Browns team right now with their, one of the top defenses in the league, some offensive talent that you at least have some hope that you can build around. I think that Sean McDermott's the type of guy who could really right the ship and instill a winning culture within this Cleveland Browns organization. Now, there's still a part of me that's deeply intrigued with Grant Udinski. And I just feel like Grant Udinski's got to be the top candidate, just with how much we've been hearing about him and how much we've heard in terms of the Browns, expressing interest in him. And they've already put together a second interview, I believe, with Udinski. So, I mean, we'll see. You would have to think we'd be getting pretty close to the Browns hiring their next head coach. Obviously Kevin Stefanski now is locked up in Atlanta. John Harbaugh is in New York. Jeff Hafley just very recently, it was announced that he was going to be hired with the Miami Dolphins. So, the dominoes are falling. The Browns are going to have a new head coach sooner rather than later. I'll be interested to see if McDermott gets any interest, even a potential interview, before that final decision is made. But let me know in the comments, is Sean McDermott the type of coach that you would like to see on the Cleveland Browns? Thank you for listening to the Mason Talk Sports Show. I will see you in my next episode. Goodbye.